How's it going, everybody? We are here for another episode of Heavy Art Talk, another panel edition. This should be panel number 3. Extremely stoked. The topic today is going to be about pen and ink techniques, as well as some illustrators that do work primarily in like black and white, most of them being pen and ink. Actually, I think I might be the only person who picked something just a little off the beaten path there. But that'll be the second part. So we have our guests, Brad Moore, Daniel Shaw, Mark Riddick, of course, your host here, Lee, and then Matt Stikker. I'll put everybody's information in the bio, but let's go ahead and get this thing going. I'm going to introduce everybody. We have Brad. What's up, man?
Hey, I'm not wearing pants.
All right. Daniel, what's happening?
Hey, man.
Mark.
What's up?
And Matt Stikker.
What's up, everybody?
So, yeah, I mean, this is a real treat for me, and I'm sure a lot of the guests here, a lot of the people who tune into the show are artists themselves, so they're kind of getting a master class for free, basically. So just really grateful for all you guys showing up, and it's awesome that you guys have all been connected in this thing, either over social media, but now you get to talk in person, basically, or at least virtually.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed, yeah. This has been long overdue. This is something that's been needed for a long, long time.
Yeah,
I agree.
We really appreciate what you're doing too, Lee.
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, same thing. I had a chance to speak with you earlier, a little ways back, Lee, and I appreciated the questions that you asked, and I think what you're doing here is pretty cool and a lot more interesting and engaging than some other stuff that I'm sure we've all been asked to do. So I'm stoked to be here and have a good conversation. Yeah.
Sweet. Now, I did want to bring up, so Brad and Mark, you guys have been, known about each other since like the early 90s. And I remember you kind of writing some letters. You want to kind of speak to that a little bit? I think that's super cool.
Oh, yeah. We were on the rowing team at Harvard. Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable. Now, I got my start in gore horror comic books and was able to go full time like pretty quickly. And so a lot of people wrote in, but I was also in the metal scene. I'll explain how that happened in a minute. And Mark actually wrote a letter to one of the companies I was working for. It was Fathom Press, right, Mark? It was
I think so. Yeah.
Cadaver and Necrotica comic books and those. Well, anyway, nice. When we got his letter, we were all looking at the samples coming in. I said, I know this guy. I know who this is. This guy does work on all the zines and stuff, and he's done a few 7-inch covers and album covers and stuff. I said, we ought to look. I wasn't the decision maker though. I was just helping out. And the guy who ran the thing was Tim Tyler, and he was always the boss. And I do remember that he turned Mark down, unfortunately, and chose somebody else, not because of Mark's talent or anything like that. It was just that this guy already had finished strips ready to go, and so that's what happened. But but through that, I started writing Mark letters, and we wrote a few letters back and forth.
Yeah, I remember.
I believe that's how we started. Yeah.
I remember exchanging some letters through snail mail back in the early '90s, and then obviously like this is I had the original, but I couldn't find it. So are you guys familiar with Send Back My Stamps? It's a
yes, yeah.
So I think Jason Netherton from Misery Index, I think he might be the one who started that site. But basically, it hosts a lot of the old underground fanzines from the early '90s and late '80s. Nice. So I used to have the original, but I couldn't find my original copy, so I tracked this one down. But it's just a printout from the Send Back My Stamps. It's the Wild Rags issue that featured Brad and Jeff Gibney and Paul Nielsen.
Oh, yeah.
There's brothers.
Yeah. Nice. Dancing.
Oh.
Obviously, that and, the Bathory comic and everything. So, I would happen upon your work every once in a while. And definitely I was in touch with, I think it was Rob. I can't remember his name. I think it's Rob Yench or something like that from Morpheus Descends. Yeah, so I remember being in touch with Morpheus Descends back when they were called Morpheus, and being able to see your art there too, Brad. In fact, actually last week I just in the mail got the repress, the vinyl repress from Dark Descent or the Morpheus Descends.
Oh,
I never had it on vinyl. I just had it on cassette.
I got one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to get.
Yeah, it was cool because just seeing your art, knowing you from back in the day, and then seeing your art now, especially there's been a bit of a resurgence or renewed interest in your work, which is cool. I keep seeing a lot of the cassettes I've picked up lately, records, they have your art on it. So it's really cool to see that. You sort of re-cemented yourself in the scene in a way.
Yeah,
the music scene.
I've broken away several times to do other projects. I worked in special effects and B movies for a while. I had a civics art program where I lived, where we did murals citywide, and did that for several years. I taught some classes, and in between, I would come back to metal and come back to metal.
Right.
And I just started taking stock of things and thought, you have one life to live. What do I want to spend it doing? And I decided that it's gonna end up being death and doom metal, for the most part. And comics when it happens. I'm working on 2 comics projects right now. After years ago, I actually publicly said I would never work in comics again, but never say never. So there's that going. Mark, there was an old I don't remember the title of it, an old fanzine, music zine, and there's a picture of you. You got your bass on, and you're in front of the refrigerator with 2 pieces of raw meat. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was Gasp, etc.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that was the name of the magazine. Yeah,
Smart, shocking persons, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they did a feature on you as well.
Yes, they did. Me and Kate Potter in the same issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that was back in probably 93, 94 or something like that.
Yeah. They did one on Tim Tyler too, the guy I mentioned
earlier. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a cartoon cat in the picture, and he drew pus coming out of the eyes and things on the physical photo and sent it in.
That's wild.
I wish I'd brought that stuff to hold up too if I'd known.
Oh yeah. I still have some of those back issues from the 90s. Yeah, I try to save what I can. I have a closet full of basically portfolio items that I don't have everything I've worked on, but the stuff that that I found interesting or that the bands were cool enough to send me, I've tried to hold on to. Yeah. So I still have some of those old fanzines. Yeah.
No. Oh yeah. See, I've got a huge stack too. They're in terrible condition. I've survived a flood and a fire out of 2 different apartments. So I'm surprised I have what I have, but but I do. And every now and then I'll pick something out, and in between it is a drawing or a sketch or notes that I think I can use this now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's something that would probably resonate with all of us here. Is there's some value in holding on to sketches and unfinished work, because sometimes you might get halfway through something and think, I'm not really feeling it, or I don't like it, and then you quit it and then move on to a different project. Or you have some sketches that you just kind of shoot from the hip, stream of consciousness kind of things that you might have lying around. When you go back maybe a year or 2 later to revisit, I think there's some value in thumbing through your old work every once in a while, because it kind of re-energizes and rejuvenates you to kind of come up with new ideas, or maybe to revisit some old ideas that maybe you just never saw through fruition. I'm sure all of you have done that. I don't know. For me, I find it useful.
Yeah, it's going on right now with me. I'm going back and taking some old sketches and finalizing them.
Well, that's perfect for Daniel. I'm probably, with your move and everything, you're kind of forced to look at your old stuff, to go through.
Oh, yeah, I don't know where anything's at. So whatever I come across that kind of sparks things, I go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know where anything's at in my studio, but that's just my personal organizational style.
Yeah.
I just do.
Yeah.
Just that way when I just discover shit, my records or any of my art or anything like that, it's I'm just kind of thumbing through and maybe I find something that I haven't seen in a few years. Don't know where the hell anything is, but I'm actually trying to find something in particular, but it's more of an adventure that way.
Yeah.
What about Daniel? When did you and Mark get connected then? Because you guys have been friends for quite some time too.
I was aware of Mark's work in the early 90s and as well, but we didn't connect till what do you say, Mark? Probably 2016, I think, or
15 or 16, something like that. Yeah. I actually I think I pulled
I used to see Mark's work in the zines and stuff, and then, you know, I got really busy and kind of dropped out a little bit. And then when I
What's
started
that?
picking stuff up again, I noticed his work in Pit magazine, and then
Pitt.
kind of kept in, you know, my eyes open for his stuff ever since. And then I don't know how we connected in
I can't remember.
2016, but
It's
we've been in touch ever since. You know.
Yeah, you know, I remember picking this up, your old band.
Oh, yeah.
7-inch.
Yeah.
And obviously, seen your work with Blaspherian, you know,
Right.
and this is the Evil Incarnate split. And I think this might be this is Imprecation, Blaspherian split.
Yeah.
So definitely was familiar with your work, had seen it around for sure. And I want to say it was maybe with the War Master. Maybe is when I really maybe first started being in touch with you, and I don't even remember how. If I ordered something through your website or what it was, and you sent a letter back or so, I can't remember. But we obviously we talk on the phone, text and stuff like that nowadays. So it's like definitely it's been a growing relationship for like I don't know the last 5 or 6 years. It seems like with you, Daniel.
Absolutely.
I mean, just like talking to any kind of artist, you know, you just to be able to vent or have some kind of common ground or shared experience. There's some validation, personal validation in that too. I think most artists have shared some kind of struggle of sorts. You know, in terms of
man,
you know whether
Mark's been through those with mine and has offered tons of support. So I got to thank him publicly for that.
Oh, you're too kind, man. You're way too kind.
Really, seriously, man.
I've got a couple of Daniel's originals set aside here. Actually, here I'll show a few. Here's one right here.
Yeah, that's what got me out of the hole there. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about
some incantation art.
Yeah,
that's sick.
But just talking about like ink work, I know this is going to look blurry up here, but the stippling on this. It's just unreal. I mean, when you see it up close, it's like, dude, what are you, a robot? The detail is just insane.
Oh, hey, Matt.
There you go.
I forgot that you scored that one.
Yeah, this was like, I don't think we'd really interacted before this, but you posted it on your Instagram as like you were doing these. I think you did a few of them, right? You did a handful of these Eddie heads, or maybe it was just this one. But I fucking love Maiden, so I've got a Maiden tattoo. You know, I'm like. Gotta get this, and this was probably I don't know, man, a while ago, like 2014,
several years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago because we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the last few years. But it was definitely a little ways before we started kind of communicating regularly.
Right.
That's kind of the thing I really like about, and I've found through doing the channel and stuff too, is it's almost like it's the good version of coworkers where you can vent about the shared experiences and struggles and get like advice and stuff. And I think that's something that I've kind of just stumbled upon too with the channel is there's a network that is just, ripe to be tapped and brought a little more to the public. So very cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, anything else?
Oh, shit.
What do we got here?
That's right. That's the one you got. Yeah.
It's funny because, there's a common thread with everybody here. This is one of Matt's originals. This is a Necro Drums.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I did that so long ago, too. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
That's huge, too.
Dude, I love the placements of your blacks in that, man. It's really good.
Yeah.
And Matt, I think I stumbled upon your work probably on social media. Like the algorithm is feeding me information, So I think I happened upon your work that way. And, I was like, dude, I got to own one of these. Your stuff is just... You got your own, you have your own style. And, it's funny because I think we're all kind of interconnected somehow, but Matt and I had our work kind of coupled together through Magic the Gathering on the packaging on one of their products, had Matt's art and one of my logos affixed to it. So it was cool to that's always fun when you see your work cross-pollinate with another artist,
Yeah. And that was honestly, I got to take it back when you bought that. I was like, holy shit, Mark Riddick just bought one of my fucking originals. I definitely was like, fuck, all right, this is fucking wrong. And you were so nice too. You reached out and you're like, so kind. And,
Dude,
that also was probably, I did that almost 10 years ago, probably 2014, 2015 maybe. It was a little while. You bought it a little while after I did it, but it was that was our initial. Never like heard from you personally on social media or anything, but like you bought that, and I was like, fuck, that was such a cool moment for me. And I think I bought a back patch off your website. I still rock a back patch on my battle vest of yours. That's just like one of your art pieces. It isn't even like a band piece. It's just like a Riddick. I get complimented on it all the time too. People are like, "Fuck, that's a sick back patch." I'm like, art. Art. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I think all of us have our, like I said, kind of cross paths here in some form or another. It's just it's a community. We're a community of like you kind of like how you put it, Lee, about us sort of being like coworkers in a way.
Yeah, colleagues. Yeah,
colleagues for sure.
Well, what's been new with you guys? Just like a little bit. Like I could start if that's cool. I just got back from Spain and I went to quite a bit of art museums, so I'm pretty inspired coming back. I went to the Prado,
That's awesome.
Reina Sofia, and then Picasso Museum, and then also the Dali Museum. So it's like the museum that he curated before he died. So it was very eye opening, and I'm coming back definitely like seeing things a little bit differently too, especially seeing some of those old masters originals. Like the one that's sticking with me the most, oddly enough, is the Velázquez piece, Las Meninas. It's like a really big painting, and then it's got the, the little girl, and she's being cared for by her handlers. It was made in like 1700s, but oh my God, it was just amazing.
Yeah. That's the one with Velázquez is like in it, right? And he's got like a mirror, and it's like it's a like portrait of himself painting her portrait. It's like a meta portrait.
Exactly.
Kind of
I've seen that. Okay.
The scale of it, man, because you can look at it online, but like the scale of that painting definitely made it so much more impressive in person. And just the technical ability,
That's one of Dali's favorite paintings, is that Velázquez painting.
Well, all the Spanish guys, they all really drew a lot from Velázquez. Like he was like their hero, and like there definitely was like that shared collective consciousness because everybody loved Goya and Velázquez, and then Picasso and Dali. They followed in that footstep. So I kind of saw that lineage too, going to those museums and reading and stuff.
Was his tomb in that place where you were? Is that where he's interred now?
Dali?
Yeah. I thought so. His wife is not, though, right? His wife is somewhere else. Gala.
Yeah. But it was like right in the wall.
Wow.
Kind of weird, but fitting for him.
Cool.
But like,
I went to Florida. Forgot what town it was, where they have a Dali museum down there.
Mm-hmm.
They even had the. I think I've told you this before. They had the projection of Alice Cooper that Dali had created with a brain floating above his head.
Oh,
you could actually
sounds awesome.
You could walk right through it, but if you looked at his face, you could see the back of his head through the face. You know what I'm saying? But if you walk, and I looked around to see where it was projected from. It looked like it was projected from 4 different places, but it was hard to tell. But it looked 3D, except it was transparent, and you could walk exactly right there. Very creepy feeling, and it was on. They just turned it on during the business hours, But they had some of Dali's really big ones, like hallucinogenic Toreador, which is several feet wide, and the one about Columbus, which is also multi-feet wide, and all that, and the salmon fishers. Have you seen that one? It's a horizontal painting. It's just, we'd be here all day if I described what's in it. It was just enough to take your head off. And my thoughts were, when I came away from that, is like, it looks like a team of people have worked on each one of his paintings. And it's just him.
With those really big, like kind of Catholic paintings they did before he died, didn't he have a bunch of apprentices helping him out? Like those huge.
Well, because he was getting older and all that, so to fill in the big blank spaces and to do the gessoing and stretching the canvas, he did.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah, but
that's the goal for all of us, right? To have a team of assistants do all this shit we don't want to do.
Great. Here's in my studio going, the skinny one there, he amuses me. Let him gesso my third piece. That'll be all right. Another day, I think. Have my cognac on the Eastern Terrace. That happens to a handful. That goes, for a handful of people that do that. Gustav Klimt had helpers and things like that. I mean, and I've often imagined being back in the days of Klimt, and just some of the things that he went through. Because at the turn of the century in Vienna, it was as wild there as it was in the 1960s here in America. It was a complete cultural revolt. A revolt, revolution, renaissance, all those R words. It was all of those things. And then, of course, everything, what happens? It all clamps down, it all kind of, everything seeps back into not normalcy, but just like, let's contain this,
Yeah.
So I've decided, and I've recently put this on social media in a couple small places, that to call this movement that all of us are part of and others are part of is, instead of the counterculture, because that's already happened, we're the under the counter culture, if you get what I'm saying. Because the material in the comic books and the album covers and stuff that we do, a lot of that is sold under the counter. Because a lot of that, we've had, gory or horrific covers that can't be shown in Walmart and things like that. So I'd like to publicly announce that that's what I'd like to call this movement, is the under the counter culture. There. I'll be my trailer.
I do declare.
That's it. I'll just be conked out for the rest of them.
Matt, were you on vacation recently? Look beautiful.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because you were visiting all the museums in Spain, and I was visiting all the museums in Italy. We just went for my wife's birthday. So, speaking of all the kind of masters and stuff, we went to the Vatican Museum and the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and some other museums and stuff. But I'm definitely feeling charged up by seeing a bunch of old masters as well. Just too much to even name. But the Borghese Gallery, which is in Rome, has a whole room of Caravaggio's, which is really badass. And just seeing between various museums. I mean, I love Caravaggio, one of my favorite artists, and the Judith and Holofernes and the Saint Jerome and all of his really pretty metal shit. It's dark. It's the chiaroscuro, the really strong sense of light and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing to see in person because you get a much all this stuff, being able to go to museums and stuff, and it's a privilege. It's rad that, to be able to do that kind of stuff because not everyone can. And being able to see that kind of artwork up close and really just get 6 inches away and see the brush strokes and see the range of values that are, you can't really replicate in an art book or a format that's that big. Seeing stuff like the Giottos. It's one that everyone, and I don't know the title of it, but it's one of the early Renaissance pieces, Madonna and Child, and it's the gold leaf background. It's all gold background, and it's the Madonna and Child. She's wearing a blue robe, and it's all blue, and there's some saints and angels kind of behind her, but they haven't mastered perspective yet. So Giotto just kind of has them looking kind of past her. They don't really look like they're all on one plane. There's no depth to it, but they're trying. And I remember that painting from art history, way back, and seeing little, that's one of those touchstones of early Renaissance. Here we go, we're trying out perspective, and then you go see it in person, and it's 10 feet tall, it's massive, and there's all these little details on the hem of the robe and the folds and the cool little really small stuff that you can't even, you could get out a loop and look at a art book and it still wouldn't have the fidelity to show you all the detail that's going on in there. Being able to go see all that stuff. I love the Prado when my wife and I were there some years back when on our honeymoon. All the Goyas in there are incredible. And my favorite thing though was the Hieronymus Bosch triptych.
Garden of Earthly Delights.
Garden of Earthly Delights, which is the single most incredible, stunning piece of artwork I've ever seen in person. And that was that. Speaking of details that you can't see. Dude, that's I'm jealous. I'm jealous all over again that you got to see it more recently because I could go there every day and just stare at that painting for 2 hours and never get bored and always leave feeling charged up. And yeah, it's fucking awesome.
I just wish you couldn't take pictures. They were really vigilant about that piece in particular. Yeah. And then there was always a crowd of 20 people around it, so you had to really take your time and kind of work your way towards the front. That's just me being petty, but sometimes with these museums and they're packed full of people, especially in Madrid, Barcelona, they can be ripe with over tourism. It can be a bit exhausting when you're just you really want to hone in, but then you got people almost shoving you. It's oh my God, I'm just trying to get in the zone here.
Yeah, Italy too.
Yeah, but it was awesome. Totally.
Yeah, it'd be cool to be like we went to the Sistine Chapel, obviously the Vatican Museum, and like I'd seen it a long time ago, like 20 years ago. But it's fucking incredible. Also, like one of the most stunning things. It's architecture. It's a whole room, and like you're shoulder to shoulder with like tons of other people and stuff. So it's like it would be great to have like an afternoon alone in there, just to look around. But it's crazy to look at all of it, the whole Lost Judgment and the whole the ceilings and everything, and it's like he did it all in like 7 or 8 years total, and it's like in like a couple of stages, and I'm like, I couldn't do that in 70. Like, I mean, not that I have a fucking fraction of the skill of Michelangelo, but like just the sheer amount of time that he spent on his back, like painting on the ceiling, and you're just sitting there going like, how do you even the stamina to even do that is incredibly inspiring, but also intimidating as fuck.
Yeah, for lighting, he had to use candles. Well, they all did in those days.
Yeah.
He lit candles, and sometimes would hold it and work, or mount it somewhere, and it's just melting down as you're working, changing the lighting. And you got to
up on scaffolding that was not modern scaffolding, scaffolding built by some dude. That's probably rickety as hell. You're probably swaying back and forth like every time you move. You're moving like 3 feet in each direction. Like, oh, don't move. Wait for it to stop. Okay.
Yeah. And we think it's high stakes and we're working in ink. That's high stakes. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I felt the same way at Giger's place in Gruyères in Switzerland. I wished everybody else was gone so I could just go through the place by myself, because there was always too many people. The artists that were there for the show, and then all the crowd that showed up too. But he did let you get right up to that close to the surface. He let you do that as long as you didn't handle it or anything. And there were some people who would reach up and touch them. Nobody said anything. You're not supposed to do that, but it happened, What was that sound?
I think it was just
Sorry.
his headphones.
Yeah. Hoping it wasn't
Phones
me.
died, so I had to. Yeah.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Actually, louder and clearer
Okay,
now.
cool.
I just automatically thought it was me.
I'm just impressed that Matt didn't spontaneously combust when entering a Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, there might have been a little bit of smoke coming out of my ears, but yeah. It's pretty badass. No, we definitely got our fill of devotional art, religious art. Like Italy's birthplace of the Renaissance and all that kind of stuff in Florence and Rome, and like the number of churches we went into, and the cathedral in Florence and all that kind of stuff. Which again, also the cathedral has a crazy Last Judgment in the Duomo on the roof, which is another even higher up where my wife and I are up in there looking up. Like, so they were on like 120-foot scaffolding painting that. Like, how are you even up there? That's
so crazy.
Terrifying to me. I'm not okay with heights. I'm like looking at that like Jesus, and then it's like not only that, but it's a masterpiece up there. Like, inspiring. I've definitely seen enough G's-Eye for quite a long time.
We can make that shit evil. That's what's cool about it.
Yeah. And cool depictions of hell too. Some great depictions of hell in the Last Judgment and the Duomo in Florence and all that. Some great demons, and I definitely took a bunch of pictures and stuff and details in the Vatican Museum too, because there's all the Raphael frescoes, like the philosophers and like all the kind of famous stuff, but all kind of throughout it leading to the chapel. There's all these cool little flourishes and stuff on the ceiling, and there were definitely like some cool little demons and people getting dragged into hell and cool little motifs. I definitely took a bunch of photos for later. I have like a whole file in my phone of like inspiration photos from the museums that we went to.
It's awesome.
It's awesome.
Well, that was to me, Vienna is the birthplace of what we refer to today as visionary art, because they, most people didn't travel more than 100 miles from their homeland if they were lucky back in those days, and very few people could read and very few people could do math, and yet by just counting out things with their hands and certain drawings and using perspective, they built Gothic cathedrals that have outlasted anything we've done in the modern era. Yeah. And some of it is a lot more meaningful and a lot more soulful, and they didn't have to be worldly and and traveled every country and all that. And they learned through a school, so through not a caste system, and one helps another. I can't think of an apprenticeship. That that's how somebody would learn. We were talking earlier about
the guild.
the guild, and got Dolly having a few young people helping him with a few things as he got into his 60s and 70s. And they've all done that. It's like it's time to do that. Giger even had people helping him and stuff when he was getting old, and kind of getting a little senile and all that. But still creating and all that. But like I said, to get back what I said, is the birthplace of what we would refer to as visionary art, where they didn't have something else to look at and go, oh, I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to do my version of this kind of thing. This is it was all full blown from the head and heart. And that's sometimes hard to remember that they did that with nobody to copy. Like Jimi Hendrix playing the guitar the way he did with absolutely nobody before him doing it that way. He didn't have somebody go, well, I'll do that and maybe a little better. Or there wasn't anybody doing that, and that's how I think of those people back in the Renaissance and slightly before the Renaissance as it led up to it. The people, their minds were in an incredible place.
That's a solid point. That's a really good point. I think it's hard. It's hard. I think as an artist, I think what you try to do is ingest all the things around you and then regurgitate it, through your own lens. And that's a solid point. I think when you find a need, like a gap or a need somewhere, that's when the creativity really kicks in. You learn to fill that gap and fulfill that need to add convenience to our existence or daily existence, whether that might be a phone or a wheel, something utilitarian. But I feel like as an artist, it's the word visionary is a great way to put it, because I think that's what we're all kind of seeking to do in our own way, but we are certainly dependent on the reach of our access to knowledge and the things around us. And we are very fortunate. You're right, Brad. I mean, back then they didn't have the same kind of access to information the way that we do now. It just almost feels limitless for us now. We're very fortunate to have what we have now to fulfill our creative endeavors.
Yeah, I agree. Well, talk about this kind of thing as arts are supposed to be for self-expression, and they are, but a lot of us do this commercially to pay the rent and all that stuff together. So where does the crossroads meet? So the idea of labeling it or adding it into the genre area of being visionary is one way of saying that you're sharing the inner, bringing the inner person out to the outside world. And although that's kind of a cliche, it is true. That's what we do. And there's a way I word what Mark just said, that art comes into every artist's, male or female, their central nervous system, and it goes through like a Cuisinart. The whole world, all your impressions, all your fears, everything you've learned, all your joys, everything you'd like to share, everything you wish you could put into words and can't. And it has to come out the other way. And it doesn't do that in every piece, but it comes out in the body of work over time. And we're fortunate that we can look back on the Renaissance and see bodies of work like that, and we can kind of chart that journey. But I think all of us are also secretly and not secretly charting our own journey as we go too. I really do think that. I think because I know that, like, when I look back at old pieces, or like I'll sell a couple of them, and I'll look at that and I think, oh, and I got 4 or 5 more like this, and I look at suddenly I remember what I was thinking and feeling at the time I was working on 1 or 2 pieces, and I think, wow, and I don't think or feel like that at all now. So that must have been, a hump you get over. That must have been that I got that out, and that part was finished. It's all it is. People hate to hear this, but it is a spiritual practice. It actually really is. And but a lot of people just go, they just don't want to know that. They just want you to paint a dinosaur on the fender of their car. And you go do that. Like I said, all together.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't necessarily carry that more kind of heady kind of spiritual aspect of what we do, like consciously into everything that we're doing. If we're going to paint a dinosaur in somebody's car, like paint somebody's window, do some kind of whatever it is that we do that's kind of pays the bills and but it's like you make it a part of your you just make it a part of your practice, and then it's kind of second nature. Like I think in order to certainly to achieve at the level that all y'all have achieved in art, you don't get there by clocking in. I mean, certainly you get there by putting in the time, but you get there by having a something else that drives you more than just a desire to pay the bills. Because I mean, you can pay the bills working at Starbucks, but
Right.
this is
More
something
motivation, yeah.
more profound. Yeah.
Well, I went to art school, and one of the professors actually said to me, he described, and I'll paraphrase this. I can't remember exactly how he said it. He says, you have the aspirations of creating something for the Sistine Chapel, but it's going to wind up on the gas tank of a motorcycle. And when he said that, I was like, yeah, good. I can go now. We're good. I said that's perfect for me. And he said while we're on this is one of the things I like to share. An album that I worked on back in the 90s, Organic Infest, and the album is called Penitence. There's a Chinese label that's going to repress that very soon. I had to send them some scans of the artwork. They couldn't find it.
Hank Kwan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when that album first came out, I got terrible reviews on the artwork. And a friend of mine, he came over and he had a magazine. He goes, "Have you seen this?" I said, "No." And what it said was, in short, it said the artwork is psychedelic, and he felt like that was, and it is kind of, and he felt like that was kind of wrong for the subject matter. And he said that it was just, he described it as if Dan Seagrave had taken the bad acid of Woodstock and made his own Nickelodeon cartoon.
Wow.
Man, that's an incredible review.
Oh yeah,
I would love that.
I love that,
great.
man.
Oh, me,
Yeah.
believe me, because what happened next? The guy showing this to me is like a guitarist in a band that I was working with, and he goes, "Doesn't that hurt your feelings?" I said, "Bro, you can't buy advertisement like that." I said, "Now
That's a compliment.
That's flattering as hell.
scrambling to see that album cover. They go, "Oh, I got to see this." And so and now lots of people have told me, actually, I think that's one of my favorites you've ever done. So, but the point is, I didn't actually do that artwork for Organic Infest. Originally, it was done for a band called the Recipients of Death.
Oh
I
yeah.
remember that band.
Yeah, they were
Wild Rags band.
in the beginning, and they balked. They didn't want to have to. Well, I just want to go into why they balked. But my original color scheme for it was all in rotting grays and purples and all that. And when JL America Records saw this, they said, "If you could punch that up with a lot of bright colors, we will commission that from you." And I said, "Sure. Why not?" I just done the Morpheus Descents cover that we just mentioned half an hour ago. And I said, "Sure, I can do that." So I went back in and just overlaid bright, because that's what they wanted. That's what they said. And of course, I got terrible reviews for doing that, but I did what I was hired to do. And now there are people who say I took magic markers and did my own version of it. And I've got, I've got the little CD cover of it hanging on my wall for 20 years. I've always liked that cover. So, so screw the critics, those miserably elite creatures,
Yeah.
Well, cool. Shall we get into talking about some inking techniques?
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right. Brad, you're up first, and
All right.
we have some of your samples up here. And I just realized I need to go back to the original slide. Let's see here. All right. Perfect. Oh, and if you want to see everything a little bit better, feel free to do full screen. It just helps out with seeing all the details and everything. I know I'm talking to the panelists here, of course, viewers too, but I've noticed that helped out in the last panel. All right, so here's your. Let's talk a little bit about this.
Okay, both of these were done for two different things, and I usually try to find where I can use an image more than once so that people see it. Both of these were created as T-shirts for the band Argus, and Argus they're not really a death metal band. They're like if Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath had a kid, that kind of, it's like
a prog doom.
It is prog doom. That's a great way to put it. They're not too proggy. It's not enough to lose you. It stays 4/4 time and pummeling, and all that stuff. But anyway, I wanted to get that, not really a woodcut look, although that was the first thing I had in mind because their music makes me think of that earlier century stuff. And I painted 4 covers for them and did a bunch of T-shirts. And these two are my favorite ones because it has all the cross-hatching techniques in it. And I like Virgil Finlay, the famous hip-hop artist from Weird Tales and the Pulp era.
Killer artist. Yeah.
Oh, he's one of the greatest. I mean, I think he set more people. There are people who are not aware of him who don't know that they're actually using some of his techniques. And that's because when I've mentioned it, they go, really, I'll look this guy up. And I didn't know whether to believe him or not. It's like, really, you don't know who this is doing the kind of work you do. But he's not far from my mind sometimes when I'm doing black and white work. So both of these have a great deal of cross hatching and stipple dot work in it. But the best thing about black and white is don't forget to use white. Don't forget to have negative space. And sometimes it's absolutely perfect to fill in every possible thing. So you just, crowd the visual field and blow people's minds. And then there's other times you need to know when to leave something blank, like in the one on the right, the lizard creature there. You see that whole background is blank. If this was in color, and I think about it in color, that would be some bombastic, coloring like a bright but morbid blue with a little bit of orange in the center kind of thing. And I see that in my head, but I don't try to draw that in there. I just leave it bright and let the viewer, they call it the gestalt, let the viewer add what they see in that sense. I used to use a little bit of Zipatone because I really love the look of 70s comic book art, mainstream and underground. They used a lot of Zipatone to get a gray area, but because you couldn't use a gray wash in those days with the way that the reproduction techniques. So in the one with the lizard creature holding the woman, the stair steps that are in the foreground have a Zipatone over them.
Love that.
Yeah, and see, and I do too. I love the effect because if you try to draw the effect, it's going to have an entirely different effect. But people said, did you color that area in gray? No, there's nothing colored in gray at all, but it gives the impression because your eyes pull it all together. But like I said, it's so easy to overdo. And I know even in my color work, there's times I'll look back and go, ooh, I overdid that one. I know people like it, but wow, I should have pulled back in a few areas. And on these, it's easier to see where to pull back, I think, or a little more convenient to see because you've got the white space, or what they call the negative space. And even though it could be a like in the one on the left with the character, the dead corpse character and the little child and the person being broken on the wheel there, medieval kind of picture. The smoke that's coming out of the top of the head is a negative empty space, and yet it's an object. So it's not really empty then, is it? Because I guess there is no such thing as a true void. Because you will read that as power or smoke or some kind of entity, something leaving it, like someone who's been burned at the stake. And then you see the big swirling apocalyptic sky up in there. And I had more fun doing the sky than I did doing the corpse. And a lot of people go, man, you love doing those dead bodies and all this. If I could do that almost like this, and I really could. But I had a blast figuring out how I wanted to do the sky up there, and that sky was ever so slightly inspired by Greg Irons, which Lee, we talked about him earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
Love him too. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I could talk all day on him. Now,
some great movement in that piece, by the way, Brad, the one on the left. I love
Thank you. Yeah, for a static image, you have to get some movement in there. Yeah, thank you very much.
I really like the effect in this sky. That's really cool. The kind of tunnel thing, kind of vortex thing that with all the
under a storm.
Yeah. No, it's got a real sense of like movement, and it really anchors the kind of top half of the piece. It really gives you kind of this top down, this kind of like subtle apocalypse going on in the background. It's
in fact, cool. You mentioned Greg Irons, personal favorite of mine as well. That when you look at that piece, it really reminds me of the movement in, say, one of his Rime of the Ancient Mariner pieces. Because he used a lot of negative space for the water and sky in those.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Master.
Vastly underappreciated, and I don't know why. Maybe he was shadowed by the superstars of the era like Robert Crumb and S. Clay Wilson and those guys. But he did have a big following. He just didn't produce as often enough, I think.
Well, and he died at 35 too, which is fairly young.
Yeah, very young. That's ridiculous. You've learned your middle name by the time you're 35.
Right.
Well, another thing with inking is don't be afraid to use solid black. I mean, there's a lot of people go, well, I shouldn't. And said, no, if it's appropriate, put it in. And if it isn't appropriate, take a white pen and go back in and put something in there to break it up. But if you put it in there and think, oh, it deadened the picture, and sometimes you can do that. But a lot of people, when they're doing ink, they number one, they don't vary their line weights. The lines in the foreground are just as thin as the lines in the background. foreground should be a lot thicker to make the foreground or the important part of the picture stand out. And then as you go further back in space in the picture, your lines should hopefully get thinner, lighter, hazier. But with black and white, you don't really get lighter. You just get thinner or smaller. Or you can kind of break it up a little bit and give the impression that it's going gray when it isn't, you know. But the idea of don't be afraid of white and don't be afraid of solid black. Contrast is key. And that's true when you work in color too, when you work in painting. And you know, we've learned in school and all that about value. People say, what does value mean? The lightness or darkness of any area or object in a work of art. And what that means is if I have something this big in a picture, but that's important and you're supposed to see it, and it's all dark colors, I'm not going to put dark colors all around it and then you don't see it. I'm going to adjust to show you its value by putting bright or light colors around it so the dark object stands out, and vice versa. And that's never more true than it is when you're working with black and white. And with ink, that's what you're working with. You can work with washes and all that stuff, but then we're getting into the area of painting, you know. And so with this sense, this is just strictly straight up graphics and just using contrast in that, you know, in that matter.
One thing I've always appreciated about your work, Brad, is just the level of complexity and just just a broad swath of your work. Both of these are highly, especially the one on our left, is highly complex in terms of you have a very good composition on it, but if you look at the directions that the ink and the line work is moving your eye in, it's multiple directions, multiple. But despite that level of complexity, you still manage to maintain through contrast and through composition something that's still digestible to the layperson. Just little things like the torture wheel on the far upper, like middle right. It's cropped off the edge, right? Which I like that it's cropped that way for one, but you just need that little bit of information there to help tell the big picture story. I love this subtle, like such a subtle move on your part, but also very impactful one. It's just that, and also the one on the right, the way that you've kept the heavy darks up front with a zipatone. And then you're like you were just talking about your line weight on that sort of skeletal, sculptural thing emanating from the ground to the ceiling. It's very like a 0.005 tip, you know, on your pen. It's just very light and subtle and very very much encompassed by that white space there. It just adds so much drama to your work.
But like an outline on that, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I just have to commend the level of complexity in your work. It's super, to me, it's super unconventional, and like the way that it's not something I feel like I would necessarily do or know how to do. But when I know when I see it, and I see it in your work quite often, and it's what that and like your use of texture is what has always intrigued me about your work. I just had to put that out there because I don't think I've ever seen either of these pieces. Maybe the one on the left before in passing, but it's to be able to sit here and really stare at it. It's my first time doing so with these two particular pieces. So very nicely done.
No, thank you, Ron.
Yeah. Beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I love the diversity of kind of texture. Mark mentions texture, and you're able to nail. I mean, you can, and Lee, you can move forward too because I can see the same thing in the detail shots, like the kind of diversity of mark making that you use, where you're not afraid to use really heavy, bold, like you're saying in the foreground. There's outlines, there's boldness, there's a lot of heavy black and white, and a lot of like areas of pure white and areas of pure dark, and then the background has this like nice, dense, fine, very fine texture, and that's rad. I mean, I love to see that kind of diversity of mark making. Is it's hard to incorporate that all together and have it look as seamless as you make it look. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, go ahead.
I was just saying, can you speak to the actual tools you're using as well for like all these different textures and to get the different line weights?
Yeah, usually this black and white work for comic books, T-shirts, zines, and all what we're looking at here is usually done on Bristol board, which is flexible even, as opposed to heavy, thick illustration board that I use for the paintings. Now, sometimes I've done ink works on the illustration board strictly because I didn't have crystal board handy or a big enough piece or whatever. But so sometimes people will say, well, that's not all. You don't always do it that way. 99% of the time it is. And as far as the ink goes, the best ink I have ever come across in a jar is called FW. It doesn't stand for anything that I know of. It's just called FW ink. And I found it in several different hobby stores and art supply shops and all that stuff. So I looked it up online and I just ordered it to be sent in because I never find it in my hometown. I usually find it in a place called Champaign, Illinois, but I haven't been there in a while. So FW, and 50% of the work that I do, believe it or not, is brush. Because a lot of people go, what kind of pen is this and that? And a lot of great. I used to be 90% brush. No kidding. Because I'm always painting, and then I would just dip my paintbrush into ink and just go with it like that. I even used to write letters to people using my same paintbrush that I just finished a project with. Just dip it in, and I would just write. I'm comfortable with a brush, but these days with these more recent pieces, I'm incorporating more pen. I don't know. It didn't change the look a whole lot, just enough where you can tell that there's more than one technique taking place there. And the pens that I use vary. I can use Sakura pens or Micron pens, or even those the kind that people used to use all the time. I don't use them anymore.
Videographs?
Yeah, Rapidographs. What was the Kura?
Yeah.
Kuranur.
Yeah.
Something drafting, whatever, and they also made Rapidograph pens. So I bought like sets of both, and you have to reload those pens. You actually squeeze the ink back into them and screw it all together and work it back together. I like the mechanical function of that. And the tips were very, very stiff, but you could work on them a little bit, like take a pair of pliers and just barely squeeze the tip, not too much, or the ink won't flow through, and get a wider or a choppier feel to the strokes, the marks you make. Tim Vigil, if anybody knows who that is, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll share a secret with you. If you look through the books, it doesn't really say this, but I did a lot of inking on the early issues of Faust when he would.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I also did some coloring on his stuff and all that stuff. Not a whole lot, because people say it wasn't that much. It was just he would send it to Tim Tyler's office, and I was working with Tim Tyler at Fathom Press. And he would say, Tim, can you help me get caught up? And what Vigil would do is he would ink the characters. He would do all of his favorite parts and leave the background or leave minor characters or just leave. There were just big parts in each page kind of undone. He goes, can you go ahead and help me finish this up because I'm falling way behind. And so a lot of us got together, Terry Stats, myself, Tim Tyler, and we helped ink a lot of those books with money under the table. And like I said, it wasn't always list. Sometimes it'll list in there like a certain fake name that sounds like a Mexican wrestler sometimes. And that was all of us combined.
I'm going to look at my issue right after this.
Yeah, look at
That's amazing.
People say, which issues? And it wasn't like that. We'd get a stack of pages. And we go, these have to be inked by Thursday. But sometimes this much on a page, or sometimes this much on a page.
Right.
Can
I ask you, what were his pencils like for the most part? Were they super tight,
very tight,
all the way through? Okay. So
very
it wasn't just in certain areas; it was all the way through.
Right? Yeah, all the way through. He
Okay.
didn't do anything nebulous at all. And where there was a solid black area, he just put an X, which is actually industry standard. If a guy is penciling it and sending the work.
Right.
Think it, you just put an X. So there would be some things that would look really good cross-hatched, but he'd put an X, meaning no, I want that to be solid black. So we didn't, it didn't mess around with his directions or whatever. I colored. He did the cover to Razor issue 4. Boy, I hope that's right. And they asked me to color it, and I for a long time I kept the little note that he sent, and then I lost it. And his only direction for the coloring was make it look like classic Wrightson.
Awesome.
That's all. Sure, that's it. Oh, sure, yeah, okay,
No problem.
yeah. And plus,
There's
there's the fear of working right there on top of a Vigil, and what if you screw up?
Yeah.
But I was a young guy then too. But oh well, who cares? But let's see. I was leading to something. Learning that or what? Because I've had a lot of people having done that work. I've had a lot of people look at my stuff and go, "Oh, I can see you're a big fan of Tim Vigil." It kind of irks me because some of the look that it got is because I put it in there, especially like some of the hair and things. I would do that stuff. They go, "Oh, you kind of borrowed that from Vigil." I just have to bite my tongue, like, because he was at a much higher level than me in those days, and so that was what I was hired to do, that kind of thing. I think I've lost track of what the original impetus of this question was, though. But
well, we're talking about tools, and I guess you're talking a little bit about pencils too. So I'm kind of curious. Yeah.
Well, I squashed the end of one of these, just barely though, the end of one of these pens, and it got the greatest choppy look to it. The pen looked like a brush stroke. And I was sitting next to Tim Vigil in San Diego at the San Diego convention. He was right next to me. And so we were working on things together. And it was the first time he and I had actually physically met. And so we were talking and shooting the shit and all that stuff. And he watched me using this pen. And he goes, I thought you used a brush. I said, 90% of the time or more I do. I said, but check this out. And I just showed him on a little piece of paper. Then I was inking on a piece for a comic book. He watched me. He kept leaning over and watching this. He goes, his words were, I can tell that you love that pen. How is it doing it? Because it's malfunctioning. I said, it was until I squashed the tip of it a little bit. And I did that with a few of them. It didn't always work. Sometimes I'd end up throwing a brand new pen away because it's like, crap, I just destroyed that one. But he liked that. He liked that trick. I mean, he even invited people over. He goes, Brad, show him that pen. Show him that pen. And I would just make some marks on paper to show him, and yeah. And he was amazed by that. But I mean, did he go on and do that or whatever? No, he didn't, But anyway, there you go. There's that. So I use, but like I said, largely I'm a brush artist. You'll notice again on this piece here, which by the way is the big fold out poster for Worm in the Forever Glade. That's the big 36-inch poster in the Worm Forever Glade album. That there's Zipatone in that one too. The gray areas on the ground below and on the tombstones fading back into the distance. That's a Zipatone effect, because when I first drew this out, I saw it in my head before I even started inking. That area will have some Zipatone on it. And it was one of the last big chunks. They don't make it anymore. I've heard they make it in some other countries. I don't know where to get it. And it was one of the last big chunks that I had. And I think it's in 2 pieces. I can't remember exactly. But I fit it all in there, and it fit just enough. And it was like, well, this will be just about the last piece to use Zipatone, because I don't know where to get it anymore. And I'm so glad that he blew that up into a nice, when I say
some of the Japanese manufacturers still, like a lot of manga artists still use it.
Deleter.
I've been told that. I don't know.
Deleter. That's right.
Sheet, yeah.
Can you order from them? I mean, do they ship?
Yeah, you can get it.
Do they
Amazon too?
Yeah. I think Ed Piscor was in Japan recently. Somebody was recently in Japan and showed on their Instagram stories them and at an art supply store in Japan, and there was a bunch of sheets of Zipatone, and I was like, and
I've been told this. I just haven't looked into it far enough. I have been told this. It's like, well, I didn't. If someone would say, "Here's where you go to get it," that I would appreciate. So anybody watching today, send me that info. If you go, oh, here's where you get it, because believe me, I owe you a drink. Because I love me some Zipatone.
You mentioned Ed Piscor. There's a really good Tim Vigil interview with the cartoonist kayfabe guys. So if you guys are interested in what Brad's talking about with Tim Vigil, there's a really good interview from a few years back where he's pretty loose and just letting it go. So it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. When you meet him, he's not anything like you've pictured. He's like really short hair, just a ball cap pulled down. He's about 5'5". I mean, it's not the man you're just imagining this guy, that looks like Morbius, the living vampire. he just doesn't look anything like that at all. Just not at all, Well, he's a dynamic soul, though, that's for sure.
Yeah. Still creating awesome art as well. Good person to follow on Instagram.
Yeah.
Now, pencils for these pieces, are you pretty tight, loose? You do a lot of it with the ink. How's that work? In terms of the file?
Largely, it's about 75% tight. There are times that I will, as I'm inking, I'll go, I've already had a way better vision of how this will go, and I'll erase the pencil, or I'll get to an area and I'll think, whoops, I didn't think this part through well enough, and I will just go right ahead and improvise with the ink in my hand. Not always, but so I'm going to say 75 to 80% tight pencil. It's all figured out. It's rarely ever improv. I mean, when you get into all the little bitty things, I don't care how many marks to make and all that, But and there are times that I'll make something have more black in it than I imagined because it was looking better that way, or there are places that I'll pull back because it looks better with less, and that's tough to know. That's one of the most hard-won skills I can say that I've got that over the years is knowing where to pull back, because I am overly detailed with all my stuff. And there's times that I look at it, like I said previously, like, oh, I really should have held back on this. But then people tell me, they go, man, I'm so glad that you go ahead and put it all in there, man. That's what I really like to see. So I think, well, all right, so just go with your gut and just kind of develop a point of if enough people tell you you're doing too much in an area, pull back. If enough people tell you that needs more, if enough people tell you that, then that's a sign that maybe you need to. And I've learned that over the years. So I've heard those things over all this time, and I listen to what people say, but I don't just slavishly decide to follow. Oh, I'm just going to change my whole stock because this one guy said something or his girlfriend didn't like it. It's not like that. You develop an inner compass, and I think everybody on this panel knows this. You develop an inner compass that just guides you along through the whole thing.
Mhm.
I think the last time I talked with Lee, I said the best feeling about creating work is that the work is already there. This is for me, and I'm just uncovering until it shows itself. It's like an ellipse. As much energy as I'm putting into it, it's coming back. I just keep working. I just almost can't put it down. In fact, sometimes I only end a day when my eyes are burning so badly that I can't. I'm like, oh, I can't keep going. I'm working with. It's like, well, it's time to quit. And my energy level is I want to keep going because it's just feeding me so much. Like I really want to see this coming to life. Even though I know what it's going to look, I've already penciled it and I've already got the picture in my head. Seeing it happen, it's like it's already been there, and I'm an archaeologist who's uncovering.
Yeah, you're excavating it.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this piece, I was just trying to find the Worm album. I don't know where I put it. I have it on vinyl because I have that poster too that you just talked about. It's huge.
Yeah.
What I find intriguing about this piece is that if you look at it, half of it is just clouds. Like almost like half the piece is just clouds. I mean, if you threw that at me, I'd be like, oh crap. What do I do with the clouds? Because that's my piece, and I really like how dynamic you've settled on, the dynamicism and the clouds that you've settled on here, and even the decision to keep some of these purely white strokes kind of emanating in and out of parts of it really saves it in a way and helps it, having that chunk of black in the upper left hand corner to let the steeple, that cathedral kind of show through. Great choices. It's because to me, when that could have just been left blank, white dead space, and you chose to fill it with tons of gray, tons of white, tons of contrast and black in there. It's really well executed. I just find that it's just so intriguing to look at, because that could have been done so many different ways, but you chose to do it in a way that has just a ton of texture in it. Really well done.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, there's a guy that I look at once in a while called Alan Kozlowski, and he does a great deal of a similar kind of shading that I did in those clouds there. And I was thinking of him as I got about halfway into it. I started thinking of Kozlowski stuff, and he did a lot of pulp illustration, but in the later, like 60s on up to now. And I dug out a couple of his pieces and looked at it, and I thought, oh, I'm on the right track, because it's looking what I'm doing on this piece and what I'm looking at his. Yeah, those all appear to be correct, and I just put it away. But as I was doing it, like I said, I wasn't consciously going, oh, I'm going to create a Kozlowski piece, but it did recall out of the back of my head, what I had seen. So it was like it's my brain is already finding all the tools it needs,
right,
to bring this forth again to externalize the internal world.
Exactly. Yeah. It's sort of like you're taking notes, right, and then you're finally flipping through your notebook, finding what you need to get something completed the right way.
Yeah, the sketch pad, Rolodex, whatever's in the head. And it's funny how the brain will just go right to that. There's days that I'll be frustrated and think, my gosh, I can't get this, or how am I gonna handle this section and whatever. And then other days, and if I sleep, or if I take a break and go play guitar for an hour and just don't think about it at all, I suddenly it's like a light bulb. It's like click. Oh, now I know how to do it. Yep. And so then I'll come back because the brain is still working. Even if you're not looking directly at the art, it's still working on how to fix that. It's almost like a dream. You wake up to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, come back and go back to the same dream. It's almost exactly like that feeling.
Great points.
Yep.
So Daniel picked up
All
just
right.
a couple of samples, but yeah, you mind talking through them?
Yeah, which one?
Or just like maybe not even just the pieces, maybe just like how you executed some of these things, some of the tools
Okay.
you use, techniques in general.
Yeah, both of those are pretty different. In the helmet area of that skull helmet piece, that was all cheesed with just watered down ink, like a wash, and then I stippled the skull just to kind of give it some contrast, you know, and then the piece on the right, that's just I wasn't. That's kind of in limbo. I'm not sure I'm going to do the foreground in that, but I kind of blended the background in with that fire with stipple. So, yeah.
Nice. I think it's awesome how you did the ink wash on the one on the left. When you're diluting the ink and stuff, did you ever have to be concerned with like consistency, like making sure you got the right amount of water to ink so it stayed around, or you just always eyeballing and just through feel?
I would test it on a scrap before I'd go to my actual piece, and just kind of do that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you have to be careful because unlike just doing regular ink, which I can correct with either white ink or whiteout or white paint, you can't do that with wash. So it's pretty tricky. But I think it gives a pretty cool effect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the contrast that it gives between the skull and the helmet. It's subtle, but like you can really I don't know. It gives it almost like it feels like a glossy metallic texture. You know that the ink wash gives it more subtle gradient. You know, so it almost looks like it's like casted bronze or something.
Right.
Yeah, I get a couple comments on this one on the left in particular too. One I like that it's a mixed media piece. It's a little bit out of the box. I feel like for some of the bulk of your work, your choice to execute the skull and the stippling, the texture on that is just otherworldly. It's so good.
Oh, thanks, man.
But also, if you look at the interior of the helmet, at the 3/4 perspective there, you've actually utilized cross hatching. So you have
That's right, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like three different dynamics going on here coming together. One other thing that is unique too is that we're looking at the original here. This is not like a grayscaled out version that's being prepped for print, like for a shirt or for
right.
Where you're going to get like a true black and white. Right now, we're seeing a picture of the raw painting. So that ink wash has like a little bit of a sepia to it, which gives it a very kind of ghostly, just a different quality. I feel like it's a different. You get a different kind of experience with this art when you see the original versus probably when you would see it in just straight up grayscale print. And I can appreciate that. I think it could be successful both ways. It's just seeing it like this in its raw form is really impressive. But the level of detail and the effect that you're achieving with that ink wash, I mean, that the wing, the texture on those wings, I feel like I can almost touch it. I can almost feel it, the leathery texture you've created on those wings. Just
cool, man. Thank you.
Super lifelike.
Thank you, man.
And it's a stark contrast from the one on the right, which is it looks like a work in progress, not completed, but it's very much a little bit more whimsical, a little bit more cartoony, whereas your other one on the left is more painterly, obviously, and somewhat photorealistic in a way. But one thing I've always admired about your work, Daniel, is particularly your control of the stippling technique. And it's almost like after seeing your work, I've noticed myself like incorporating more of it in my own work. But it's almost like a self-abuse technique
Can be.
For sure.
It's a great result, but it's painful. It takes forever for one, and you get a little bit of carpal tunnel from it.
Sure.
But it looks awesome, and dude, that's one thing I've always admired about your work, especially your treatment on textures like fire and like these sort of ghostly emanations that you've created with using stippling. Just insanely good.
Oh, thank you, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
your subject matter so frequently like overlaps, or maybe it's just because it's grown symbiotically, but like you do so many like kind of like ghostly ethereal, like you do a reaper, but it doesn't feel solid if it's like floating, and it's got kind of like it's almost like it's like in the process of becoming incorporated into reality,
Right.
And like the way that you feather all the detail that you get with the stippling, all the effects that you achieve with that. I think of like what was it? Toxic Holocaust cover, the like the witch like Conjure Command cover, like
Oh yeah.
all that kind of stuff where it's like the hair and it's like those kind of effects that you get, and like flames, like Mark was saying, like you like it kind of overlaps or it imbues all your subjects with this kind of ethereal ghostly quality that like really I don't know, it's cool, man. It gives it a real personality, a real like uniqueness.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Yeah.
I also commend you for drawing these damn logos onto your actual drawings.
I know, for real.
The biggest pain in the ass, dude.
Well, I'm not. I don't do Photoshop. I don't know anything about computers. I'm all just hands on, man. I don't mess with anything. It'd be easier, but I don't know. Also, too, if it's not drawn on there, it's old school cut and paste with me. Like
Right.
I'll literally like do paste ups and stuff if I have to. I don't know. That's just the way I. Also, I just think there's something to be said about, even if it's for production, just having a piece of original art as it is, like be it for something in print or not. I don't know, but that's just the way I do it.
Well, I think you have a really solid point there, because going back to the earlier conversation about your trips to these art galleries for the three of you, it just Lee and Brad and Matt, you guys got to experience that art, and you're talking about the detail that you can see up close that you're obviously not going to see in a reproduction in a book, and to be able to have that human element where you can see a brushstroke, it's made by hand. Don't get me wrong, digital is a tool, like digital painting is a tool, but I don't know if you're ever going to see that in an art gallery the way that or experience it the way in an art gallery you would like an acrylic and oil painting or something of that nature. There's something to be said for the rawness, that human touch when it comes to creating art, that to me as an artist has a lot of value.
Yeah.
Not even just me as an artist, but for the person who experienced it.
Well, our eyes take in a certain amount of light. So when you're looking at a piece of art, and however the room's lit at that time is how you're going to see it. And when you hold a piece, even in your hands, and you turn it, or the light hits it a certain way, I mean, it's, you're holding original piece, you're just going to get a different feel from it versus it being printed in a book, or you're looking at it on a screen.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a powerful thing, I think,
Yeah. No, your commitment to having that intact, whole, complete piece of art is like, man, it's commendable, because that's somewhere where I feel like I not often, but sometimes, where like if a piece of mine, maybe it's going to have a lot of color, or there's an area with the logo or something where like not all the time, but I do, as someone who does a fair amount of Photoshop, not necessarily compositing, but I scan everything in, I prep everything Photoshop wise for I'm sending my clients like a fully finished thing, and with logos and stuff like that, I'm going in Photoshop and masking off the logo in Photoshop and that kind of stuff. But then sometimes that leaves me with a piece that is like 85% finished, and I kind of look at it and I go like, that's and that's part of sometimes I'm just paying the bills, and I really, I can't afford to spend the 8 or 10 hours that it might take to finish the whole piece. But a little bit of regret that I
Well,
I'm cutting corners there.
but that makes
Still
sense.
cutting the corners.
But that makes sense though, because when I was doing client work, I don't do client work anymore. But when I was doing client work, I would be mindful. If there was any kind of logo work, I would either do it separately, or if it was in the piece, I was really mindful about how that was going to end up. And if it was separate, somebody else would be putting it together, be it somebody in the band or whoever the client is, because I don't have those skills. I literally don't know Photoshop. I mean, if I did, I'd probably do that. But it makes sense in when you're doing something for production or graphic, any kind of thing graphically, it's just, it makes sense to do it that way. But I guess, and then the thing on the right that we're looking at, that's just my own personal thing for my zine. Like, so this, I'm literally like taking that when I'm done and slapping on a photocopier and printing X amount of copies and stapling it. I mean, I'm old school, this is how I do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Love it, man.
So.
We're talking yesterday too about, how you if you don't mind sharing that, but you were telling me about how you got introduced to like using a brush and how like that really changed like your style and stuff. So I just got like a couple of stills of you just doing the brush and like you're like kind of turning the page to get a really good line. And if you don't mind speaking a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Before the brush, I was either using, which I still use, pens and tech pens and stuff, but I was primarily trying to do most of the work with a crow quill. And for me, it just really stiffened things up, even more so than a pen, which is odd because you really get, with a crow quill, you can get kind of brush-like line qualities with it. But for some reason, just my hand and the way that I draw, I guess it just really stiffened me up. And I couldn't really see that. But meeting the artist Mark Schultz, I don't know if y'all are familiar with him. I met him in '98 at a convention, and I showed him my stuff. And he's like, hey, this is really cool, but it's really nice, but you should try to draw with a brush or ink your stuff with a brush. And I was like, what? Okay. And he told me what to get, and I tried it. And it took me and he was correct. He said, it's going to take you a few years to get used to this. It took me about 5 years to really get comfortable with it. And I was telling Lee the other day, each piece is different. Some will, there might be a piece that's all brush. There might be a piece that has, maybe half brush work or no brush work. But every time I approach a piece, I think about, where am I going to do some brush work in this? And Mark, that part in that corner that you saw in the helmet with the hatching was done with a brush.
Oh, wow, really?
So, yeah, I'll always, and then with the same brush, I did all the wash, but that's not linear, obviously. But, yeah, so it really adds just this fluidity and weight, and it's just such an awesome tool. And brush pens, too, they offer similar qualities, and some of them are fun to use for quick things, but it just doesn't compare to a sable hair brush dipped in Indian ink. It's just, if you really get the control down, you can get hatching lines that almost look like etching or claymore. I mean, it's you can really get that awesome, razor sharp, thin to thick with the negative spaces in between that really give you that.
Is that like what Finlay would use? Virgil Finlay, would he do a brush?
No, he used clapboard, which is a technique where you're inking on the board. It's this board that's treated with a white surface that enables you to scratch your negative space off. So you kind of have to think in reverse. A current artist that really, to me, is like the modern reincarnated version of Virgil Finlay is Tyler.
Yeah.
That dude makes me mad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
too good.
It's otherworldly. So that's the current person right now that I think that uses that specific technique really, really well. But no, no, I don't. From what I can remember reading about him, no, he may have used brush here and there for maybe huge black areas, but it was mainly
for hair he did.
Yeah, mainly pen and clayboard. You know.
So with the pieces we're looking at here, Daniel, you're holding a brush in the imagery here. Are you starting out using a brush with most of your pieces? Is that kind of like your go-to first tool that you get out is a sable hair brush?
Not all the time, no. The reason I'm doing it there is because the suit on that Eddie was primarily going to be all kind of a shiny black.
Okay.
Primarily black, so it's easier for me to kind of fill in huge areas that are going to be black and then pull off of them to create the highlights.
So can I ask you a question about the Eddie piece? So the wiring on the chest plate. So like let's say you go in with your black brush. You don't outline the wiring first just to kind of make sure you stay in the in the lines, or like what if you accidentally like cover part of the wire? What do you do to repair, like to get that wire back? Are you using like a jelly roll or white paint or something like that?
No. Or
are you just meticulous about how you paint?
Sometimes, like if I see something that would be better suited for pen, I'll go back and do that. But specifically for that area, I can't really recall what I did, but I'm pretty sure what I did was I filled it in black and then pulled up to leave a highlight and then maybe put a drop shadow underneath that wire that you're talking about. Okay. If I screw up for quick little, small areas, I'll use either this, which is what I've used this stuff for like 30 years. This Pentel correction pen. If you use it fast, it dries flat and you can draw over it, But this new stuff I found, this Japanese company that makes the Zipatone we were talking about, the leader. They have this white ink that I have a white brush just specifically for this stuff that you paint on, and when it dries, you can draw over it for mistakes. Also, for like bigger areas, you got to water it down a little bit, but it's really good.
Is that pretty good coverage? Because I use white gouache for my mistakes.
Yeah.
Is that better?
This is excellent coverage.
I gotta check it out.
I personally, I think it's a little easier to handle than the gouache, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But,
okay. Yeah, I gotta check it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I was just curious.
Sure. Yeah. But now, typically, I go at it, and once you get a rhythm going, I'm not thinking about mistakes really. Not to sound,
you never make them.
No, I do, but I'm just not. Yeah, you just go at it. Yeah.
With like organic forms, like the tentacles too, like they just lend themselves well for brush work because
absolutely.
A little bit of a varying line weight makes it way more lively.
Well, that's a good example of when to maybe break one out, depending on what your rendering is going to be, your cross hatching or whatever. But that's a perfect example to maybe start something off like that with a brush because of just the flow of it, because it just offers those lines that just work well for that subject matter. Yeah.
Are you using different like brush nibbed or sizes or are you just sticking with one mostly and just hitting
It's
all-
mainly one. Yeah, because that one there is probably a 2 or a 3.
Okay.
There's a couple different brands that I use. There's either Winsor Newton or it's Raphael.
Yeah, I use the Windsor Newton Series 7. I think
Series
I
7,
got
yeah.
that from. Yeah, you were using that, Matt, and I think you might have
Yeah,
recommended it to me, Daniel, too. And I caught
Yeah.
I might have to fool around with that. I've never used
It's well worth the effort, man. I think it really pushes your work to. And again, I don't use it for every piece, and some pieces just are about half and half, or maybe there might be just a tiny spot in the piece where I use it, but.
Will it work on
I don't think. I mean, I would recommend more of the Bristol stuff that Brad was talking about it earlier. That's like my go-to stuff.
Yeah.
I use the illustration board, so I use the extra heavy stuff, so it doesn't warp at all. But yeah, that's one thing, especially with areas of black where because Mark, I know you. I mean, not to jump ahead, but Mark, I think you use a lot of Sharpie, right? You use and like that doesn't warp the paper as much. Like when I do, which I do sometimes use Sharpie for fill, but like black, like even a small area of black fill, with using a brush, because I do a lot of stuff with brush. And like if I'm not using, even like decent heavyweight sketchbook paper will warp a little bit, with that ink fill. So.
Okay. All right, I was just curious. Thank you for answering those questions. I really might have to fool around with it at some point. I like the idea. I've been using these brush pens, but I've never used a straight up brush with an inkwell. I think it'd be kind of fun to fool around with.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, Tim Butler likes those brush pens, and he actually, when the pen runs out, he just dips it right into.
You can do that too. Yeah,
really.
But the tips on those brush pens, you got to be really careful with. They wear out quickly. They get
Yeah.
But hey, that's a good suggestion though, guys. When brushes wear out and get soft, take fingernail clippers. This is what I do, and clip them to be really uneven all over the place like this, and then just smash them flat so they're sticking out all over the place. Let it dry like that, and then use that as a texture brush. People always talk about textures. That's my go-to thing, because people always say, "Are you using a sponge, whether it's ink or paint?" No. I said, here's what I do. And I take that and then you just go around. And again, it's a stipple dot technique. And vary where you're going, move the paper as you're going, and you will surprise yourself by what you'll get on such a
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Good for foliage.
Foliage for rocks.
Yeah.
I do a lot for rocks. And never break the brushes and throw them away. There's a lot you can do with those. I'll use them right up to the very last. When I finally throw a brush away is when the bristles or the hairs are coming out and they're landing in the work, and I have to take tweezers and pick them out, and that messes things up.
Also, I'll use an old brush for dry brush technique.
Yes.
When you pull off and it leaves that kind of rough texture from the But good tool.
I've got a whole jar full of old brushes. I'm looking at a jar that's like half. It's not organized, like nothing, but. Because I do the same thing, Brad, that you're talking about, but I'll use it for, generally speaking, because with my ink technique, I like, my stuff tends to have cleaner lines and but then when I come back in like for fog texture and for mist kind of texture with the white gouache, like I have a whole bunch of brushes of various sizes that I do the same thing. Once they've outlived their usefulness, I just I mess them up, and make sure that they're all, but I've never tried taking the nail clippers and physically like shortening some of the bristles.
Get it all.
I've got a whole jar full of gnarly looking shitty brushes that are perfect for kind of just scrubbing in, or just kind of stippling in that kind of mist effect.
Side of it, everything,
yeah.
Does everybody use Indie ink, or does anybody use Sumi ink?
On that helmet, I use Japanese Sumi.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for the most part, like the just general line work and cross hatching with a brush, I just use Indie ink. I use Brad mentioned it earlier, like those old Rapiographs that you would fill up. I use the ink that used to fill those pins up for my brushwork.
Yeah, that's good ink.
Yeah, it's real black. It's nice. Yeah.
That's cool.
Mark, I think you're up. Yeah, so first of all, you get the A+ on the homework assignment. He sends me this whole slide deck, fully branded,
Oh,
literally
man.
within like
That's amazing.
2 hours of me like
Oh,
sending
no.
the email.
Yeah,
And
no.
then I don't follow directions at all. And this is like
I know,
the
I'm
perfect.
This is group project dynamics right here. Okay.
Let's do it. No, I actually, it's funny because Lee, I worked on that the day before because I'm thinking to myself, oh man, I got to get something together for this panel session. So I knew you used PowerPoint for your slides, so I thought, okay, I'll just throw something together in PowerPoint. But yeah, my inking, I just basically talked about, well, the slides are basically just representing my process and just trying to show the tools I'm using in each step of my process. It's nothing super elaborate, in my opinion. Basically, the first step is just once I have my sketch kind of worked out. Matt can probably appreciate this. Sometimes what I'll do is because my sketches, they're not always super clean. What I'll do is I'll sometimes scan my sketch in and blow the levels out in Photoshop, and then print out on a piece of paper a blue line, essentially like a cyan, like a light cyan, like a 20% cyan print, and I'll just ink on top of the blue line. So sometimes, depending on how much cyan I drop into my, how messy my sketch is, or how much. Sometimes when you look at my original art, you'll see like a little bit of a blue tint to it, kind of like your originals, Matt. You still leave some of your blue lines.
I use the
non-repro.
This one's almost gone, but I use the Stadler.
Yeah.
I take them all the way down, but yeah, that's, and I pencil with these and then ink directly over it. Yeah, so but I've done that before also, like for certain things, for stuff that's kind of technically demanding. Like I think like for good example for like probably you do some similar stuff too when you have to draw something really specific, and it's kind of like I did Event Horizon artwork for Creeperama for a shirt of theirs, and like the sphere. In the center of the spaceship is like, I can't technically draw something that geometrically perfect and have it, be the center focus of the composition. So I went in like Procreate or something and kind of sketched over it, and then printed that out, blue line exactly like you do, and then I inked it. I think analog over the sketch that I did over the photo.
Right, exactly. That helps. There's some things that aren't like when you're an artist, you take in information, and if it's something that you're uncomfortable. I was funny. I was talking to my dad just yesterday about some of this stuff. We were trying to philosophize about art a little bit, and one of the things I mentioned that I'll do every once in a while is I'll just pop open a newspaper, and I'll draw just some random picture in it of like either it can be a politician or it could be something as dull as like a bathtub, you know what I mean? And that having that experience helps kind of build up your lexicon, the things that you get to lean on to draw on. But there are some things that are outside of our comfort zone for sure, and you're obviously going to get a better result if you have some kind of reference point, whatever that might be. But anyway, so going back to process, I'll just usually either ink right over the sketch or ink over my blue line, and I'll use a fine brush Pigma pen, or it depends. Like the fine brush kind of gets you a little bit of like a little bit tighter, more narrow strokes and a little bit thicker. You can't get too thick with the fine brush, but enough to get a couple like nuances without being so sterile as just an 01 pen, micron. But that's essentially what it looks like. So basically the first step is just getting all the parts outlined just to get a general idea of the form that I've created here, with the illustration, just to get a sense of what it is that I'm going to be inking. So that's the first step. If you want to move on to the next one, Lee. The next step I do when I ink, after I get the outline kind of worked out, is I just pop in the darks with the bold brush or the medium brush. It's a Sakura. Sakura was cool enough to hook me up with some of these when they were prototyping them, and I just fell in love with them because I'd never touched the brush pen before. So I've just stuck with their product since working with the prototypes. I really love them. I still use them all the time. So after the heavier darks are dropped in, I'll just go in with details, and I'll use different tools for the details. See the different nibs, the 005 and the 01 are pretty much my go-to. But I'll sometimes use it like an 03, 05, or 08 on different parts. Basically, just getting in some of the detail work.
What's that? What is the PN? I've never even seen that before.
It's like I don't know what it stands for. It's just like
It's
a
kind
super
of like a felt
generic.
tip, kind of.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It is a little bit like it's like a generic kind of pen. It's like a middle of the road size, kind of like what you might get with like any kind of writing pen. It's not a specific like nib number. At least from what I can gather. Somebody just hooked
Is
a friend of mine.
it like a fountain pen?
No, it's just like a regular ink pen. I don't. Oh look, I don't.
Is it a felt tip pen? I'm like I just have to. Look it up on
It's
that.
similar to like not exactly, but it's similar to like a Papermate flare pen, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to liken it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's nothing elaborate. One of my art buddies gave me one, and I was like, oh, okay, I never heard of this, and I just started using it. So I'm like, okay, I guess this is going to be part of my toolkit now. No, I didn't do any research on it or anything. I was just like, okay, thanks.
Sometimes
so
you
the
just know what works.
Yeah. So the next step, once I get all my details in, I just start popping in. What I'll do is I'll usually scan in the white background version so that when I deal with customers, I make sure that not all the time, but most of the time, make sure they have a version of the art with a white background and a version with a black background so that they can reproduce on light or dark colored products. This one, I went with a black background and I just fill all that negative space with Sharpie markers, different sizes. Not those magnums have a pretty gnarly smell to them.
They do. Oh god.
Yeah.
I like that smell.
But anyway, so if you go to the next slide, Lee, once the black background is filled in, I'll hit it with. Usually the contrast is too stark and I need more grays. I find once the black background's in, I need more gray in it, so I'll go back in with even more detail, and then I'll catch the edges with the jelly roll pens, usually using like an 05 and 08 and 010 or a 10 nib size on those jelly rolls. And that's when I do all like the mucus and all the gnarly stuff that goes in there with the jelly rolls. So that's basically the icing on the cake when it comes to the art. And then once I'm done with that, I'll scan it in, and obviously I have to adjust the level so I get like a true white, true black, so that when the customer reproduces it, it looks correct. Well, that's it. It's very straightforward, and that's pretty much my approach on everything I do.
And copy paper, and if the piece is too big, you tape 2 pieces of copy paper
Yeah,
together.
actually, it's
That's
funny.
amazing.
I just did that. Just the
Wow.
other day.
All right, let's see this thing.
It's like this is where it folds. It folds here. You can see I taped the back there. I don't know if you can see the tape.
Dude.
Kind of like how you make a zine too. I mean,
Yeah, pretty much old school, right?
yeah.
I didn't look. I was so lazy. I didn't even fill in the middle. I just like, I'll just do that in Photoshop.
Dude, what I love about your stuff, man, I mean, I've told you this before, but everyone's here, so I want to kind of say it publicly. Your stuff is like the perfect marriage of graphic art and illustration, because this is a single image here, and not that there's really like a narrative to it, but it has the detail of which you would do like in an illustration with maybe some narrative.
Sure.
But then it's graphically, it's just powerful. It's got the shape, and you see it, and it's just got a clarity. But then at the same time, it's just got so much detail in the right places, though.
Yeah.
And man, that's kind of rubbed off on me lately because I'm doing just a lot of single pieces, and I don't know. I just try to keep that balance in mind. It's just super cool.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about what we're doing, we're just playing with shapes, right, and forms.
Yeah.
And you're right. This particular piece is doesn't really have a storytelling element to it. It's just a thing that is living in space. And it's the reaction you have is probably that it's more visceral and like, oh, this is something that's extreme or disturbing or disconcerting, and that's all the only purpose that this might be serving for the person who's interacting with it. But it is very much reliant on graphic design elements, graphic design principles,
Right.
Understanding composition and contrast. And I mean, I think we all as artists sort of have an intuition about us that we can depend upon or lean into in terms of creating. Like we were pointing out Brad's stuff earlier, with their compositions, but they're highly complex. There's a lot of things going on, and you can almost pull out like 3 different things that he's utilized to make a good composition, whether it's like an X composition or maybe using a diagonal or a repetition of the circles for visual harmony, stuff like that I was seeing going on in his work, or even just leaning on the use of texture to help balance the piece out. So doing graphic design too is like part of what I do as well, but I do lean on that for sure. I am reliant on some of those ideas to help kind of inform my work and what I want to do. Especially when you look at like a T-shirt, for example, if you're doing a T-shirt print,
Sure.
It's harder to, I feel like, tell a story. You just want to give like a general impression of something. It's got to live in an open area it can't really necessarily be framed in. It has to live in space, so you have to think about it. How the work is being utilized, what the finished product is. It's also going to inform like how you attack a piece. So this one's just a shirt print, so I'm not looking to tell anything elaborate.
Right.
I'm looking to give a general impression.
Well, it lends itself well to anything iconic, when you
right.
Yeah. The form follows the function in a lot of cases. The way I frame stuff has been warped is probably a negative sounding word, but kind of formed in part by by the fact that it's going to be reproduced a lot. So like the boldness of the mark making has something, in my case, something to do with I want to make sure that I can actually capture this and it can be screen printed, and the fidelity of the screen print won't totally ruin the effect that I'm trying to achieve here. And that kind of graphic boldness is a part of it. And I'm going to say, along with what Daniel's saying, the stuff that stands out the most. I mean, your mark making is so fucking great. The rendering, the texture that you're able to get, the fucking rotten, the kind of just fundamentally kind of like the Riddick texture that you do is so fucking great. And the mozzarella pull of
right. I love it.
like this stuff that you do that's so like Riddick. But the thing that really breaks it to, the really next level about it is the stuff that I think probably has helped make your work so recognizable and so iconic is like the way that you does have that really strong, like all of your stuff, if you squint and you look back at it, it's like making some kind of like a figure or a character. There's a path, there's a shape, a flow to it that is kind of, and you have this really innate, intrinsic sense of composition that your eye just always seems to be going from the top down, and then it's going back, and then it's following all these curves, and
it gives it power,
always circling around, and it keeps it really like attracts your attention in a way that is beyond just like, oh, that's a cool skull. Like it's got this kind of subtle power to it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for. I mean, it's funny. It's really interesting because sometimes you don't. I don't know about you guys. I don't really sit around and think about or philosophize about my own work. I just don't. I don't have time for that.
I just do it. Yeah.
It's on to the next project. Yeah. It's really interesting to hear feedback from other artists because I guess I don't really, those things that you're pointing out, I don't think deeply about. I just kind of do them. So it's kind of enlightening in a way to hear from you guys, how you're perceiving it. So I do appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Oh yeah, that's just the finished product, how it might be utilized.
Looks great.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Cool on the sleeve too there.
Yeah, a little sort of a it's kind of like a little sampling of the what's happening on the front. It's a little bit different, but it pulls from pieces from the front.
I mean, I'm seeing it really small because I'm on my phone, man, and it's totally readable. Like
Cool.
it's like a little bit bigger than my thumbnail, literally, and it's just so readable right here. That's
cool.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the last point I was going to make, and this is something that I'm sure you guys can all relate to. You have to, going back to the information that you take in about what you know how to draw and what you want to repeat and what you want to introduce that's new. I think in part also related to that is how do you ink things? How do you I mean, we're limited to black and white, so how are you? There's just so much versatility with what you can do with just black and white, and to exercise more than just cross hatching or stippling. It's just thinking about textures, and here I've just picked, I don't know how many I have on here, 12 or something like that, 18, just different textures that I kind of will utilize on occasion. There's others too, but these are the ones that I'm just looking at some pieces that I thought really they're very different from one another, but they're all still just black and white, and they all have something to say. They all resonate differently with myself as the artist, and also probably with the viewer.
Right.
But just having these things in your toolbox can really come in handy when you want to introduce more diversity, more versatility in the way your finished product is going to look. So I just thought I'd share this because I think texture is a really important part of what we do.
Did you create each of these, Mark?
Yeah, these are all like samples from different pieces of art.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to put this together.
Yeah.
And
Yes, thank you.
Anybody watching this video, because it is mostly artists who are probably going to tune into this, like you guys are getting a free class basically from everybody on this panel, but like this is like literally like a cheat sheet. So thank you, Mark. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean,
Can you imagine Mark Riddick doing a college class? He goes, "All right, everybody, let's get excited. This is the second week of my phlegm unit."
Pull out your copy paper.
I'll go phlegm and debris. Phlegm on there. But
awesome.
even Brad, just looking at your work too, like some of the earth and like soil and textures you have in your work. Even just talking about your trick with like they're using a dead brush, that you butchered. It's just those are great tips, and tricks and things that you can really go back to if you're trying to tell a story in your art, and also just the importance of like, having some kind of repetition in your work to help like move your eye across a piece of art. Maybe you do scaling in the bottom right corner of your piece. Maybe there's another character that has scaling in their armor on the top left. Just something to help kind of move your eye all around the piece, just to be able to repeat some of these textures. You don't have to use them all, but maybe you pick two or something like that.
Yeah.
It just helps make the work more versatile and dynamic. But yeah, so these are just a few of the things that I'll reference or go back to on occasion when working on something.
It's awesome.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Let's get to Matt. So
Yeah,
just
buddy.
a couple random pieces that are in progress and stuff, but
yeah, I need to do a better job documenting. I mean, not these are perfectly good selections. I need to do a better job documenting. I mean, Mark, you set the bar really high there with the actual step by step. Yeah, I don't actually take a lot of progress shots, which maybe I should do more. And people ask me about it on social media and stuff, and I just always forget. But once in a while, I remember. So yeah, Yeah, this is the one on the left is part of a piece that I did for Chemists. I don't know if you have the completed one, but it's not important. I did a tour poster for them, and it was part of like it's a tower illustration. It kind of was part of their lore for the album that they were doing, and that was kind of a specific request. They were like, we want to do this like kind of tower thing, and so we kind of went back and forth about what's the tower look like, and kind of came up with this sort of mutated living rock kind of tower situation. But you can kind of see there. Obviously, I do the non-photo blue pencil. Which and you can also see there I pencil pretty loose, like especially with stuff like this where it's areas of like big areas of texture, and it's a similar texture. I like, I kind of like letting the ink, dictate what's working, what's not working, and kind of letting, I also use a brush. I mostly use the Winsor Newton Series 7 size 0, kind of like Lee, you were saying, and same brand. And I probably use it again similar. I think Daniel was saying, like, most of the time, but not every time. And there are times when I use a lot of a brush when it's 100%, or 95%. And there's times when it's 50-50. I mean, I generally speaking, on any piece of decent size, I'm usually using a brush. And this one,
it's good to mix it up because I think it gives it a just, I don't know. It's that varied line weight with the mix of the pen and the brush together really gives it a dynamic feel, I think.
Yeah, and you can get some really fine, really fine lines with the brush, especially size 0. Like a pretty small one, and so you can get some pretty nice like fine lines. But also like you can in both of these. I did, and the progress on the one on the left is kind of still early in the shading, and there was a lot more shading that came afterward, but you could definitely see it on the right one here, which is finished. I used a lot of brush. There was a lot of brushes, a lot of bold lines, and like in the flames, all of those kind of marks that are kind of in the flames, that's all brush, all of it's brush, and a lot of the stuff on the skeleton is brush. But kind of after I did a first pass in that one and came in and did the flames, it was like, oh, the skeleton needs to be darker, flames need to stand out a little bit more. And then what I did, which you might be able to tell a little bit, is came in and did a bunch of cross hatching with like a 005 or a 01 pigment micron, and came in and kind of just pumped up the values a little bit using that, which is to me easier to do using one of these guys, compared to using a brush. Takes a lot of really fine motor control, and when you're trying to when you're shading, it's easier to kind of take a pen and go dip, 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 and kind of get a little bit of a have a rundown and have that manifest itself a little more quickly, so you can kind of tell the value level that you're getting. Whereas with the brush, it's always a little bit more labored to not overdo it. It's easy to overdo it with the brush, whereas when you're using a really fine tip, micron pen or something, it's easier to kind of gradually build the values, when you're cross hatching and bringing in some of that technique. But yeah, I mean, I love I use the brush as much as possible because it rolls and it's super fun, and I highly encourage everyone out there who's watching who may not have tried it, give it a try. And it's tough. There's a learning curve for sure. Like, definitely don't expect it to work for you right away, but
worth the effort. Yeah,
it's so worth it. And like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a couple of years that you got to put in, kind of learning to build it up. But it's also as you progress, what I found for myself, can't speak for anyone else, but as I progressed, I became more comfortable using the brush for finer and finer detail. Where I started out, I was using the brush for outlining, for getting those nice kind of organic, variable line width kind of outlines, and for blocking in, the darker areas and stuff. But then as you get your motor control increases and you're, for me, able to get that motor control better and get finer and finer lines, like to now where I use the brush as much as possible, generally speaking. Like, if it's, especially like, you could tell I love organic forms. I love doing stuff that has these kind of organic shapes. I even took a, architectural piece and made it organic. So, brushes are really good for that. And when there are the times where I find myself using a pen more is when I'm drawing a building, using a ruler, stuff that, where I'm trying to get deliberately very, very
for
consistent lines. Yeah. And then sometimes for smaller details, for faces or hands or things where I really want to, where I don't want, I want to be precise, where I'll come in and I'll give it like one pass with the fine pen. And then maybe I'll even go over it with a brush after that. but apart from that, like I try to use the brush as much as possible.
Yeah, similar approach. That's kind of how I approach pieces with both brush and pen. The outlook on it. I got to say, man, the position on that skeleton is awesome.
Thanks, man.
Did you pose for that? Like I do that. I take pictures of myself.
Yeah, I think there's probably like on my computer is probably like a folder, or if you just open the photo booth on you, there's all these.
The hands are really nice on
it. Stupid poses, and like me, like taking my desk lamp and moving it and putting it under.
No, I do the same thing.
Okay, what if I do that and like, okay, how's the hit the hand? And it's like, me holding my hand up to the camera and trying to get the right lighting on it and stuff. But
it works.
I definitely do that a little bit, and I appreciate it, man. Yeah, this is kind of I like hands, so it's funny. My wife has pointed out how many hands there are in all of my work. There's always hands gesturing and grasping and shit. But it's one of those things, skulls and hands. I just find endlessly kind of fascinating to draw. So they get incorporated into a lot of my work. But that piece I really enjoyed. That's kind of one of those pieces that. Not quite going back to like what Mark was talking about initially with like the sketchbook, going back and kind of pulling old pieces out and revamping them or rethinking them. I think it was either Mark or Brad who was talking about that kind of at the jump, but that was one that was like a runner-up for a piece of label art for beer for a brewery, and they were like, damn. We really like, C and D on this sheet, but I think we like C more, but we like D so much. Can we like turn that into a shirt, or can we do a piece of merch with that? And like, that does happen from time to time. I mean, this is a particularly rad client of mine, but sometimes that stuff will come up, where you present a client with, some options, a variety of sketches, and sometimes they like multiple ones enough to, either use it or remember it and maybe come back to you and pay you more money in the future to do more work for them. Or, it's just a cool design and it doesn't get made. And that's when, you maybe come back and you go, this is probably one that I liked when I did it. And I was like, if they don't like this one, I'm probably going to come back at some point and revisit this and use it for something. And I've got behind me a whole bunch of sketchbooks down there, and I've got shelves and shelves of old sketchbooks of stuff there. And I definitely go through it from time to time, whether it's like, kind of lettering concepts or random little sketches, but a lot of times it's sketches that are not particularly developed, but stuff that was pitched to a client as part of like 8 or 10 sketches maybe that I pitched to somebody, and I really liked 3 or 4 of them, and they only picked one, and so I'm like, great, that just gives me more ammo for stuff in the future. And I'm not reusing. I would never like reuse stuff from client to client. I'm not that lazy, but I reuse the idea and I would redraw it, for a different client for a different project, you taking that idea and just redoing it, maybe doing it better if it's 2 or 3 years down the road or 5, I could do this better now. And whatever, wasn't working before, I can tweak it to make it work better.
Hey, Matt, I was going to ask you, do you always blue line loosely and then tighten with the inks, or do you ever do a tight pencil line drawing ever?
99.9% of the time I'm pretty loose with the blue. I mean, to be fair, like this, like specifically here on the left is super loose because it was just me being like, I'm gonna have fun with texture, I'm just gonna get the brush out, and so I'm gonna be really loose. And like, you can kind of tell, like at the top, you can kind of tell where I knew that I wanted there to be kind of, nooks and little areas of dark.
What's that one with the cyberpunk, the crazy?
Yeah.
Did you pencil that one, or was that all blue lined also?
Great example of that was all. I believe that was all blue. That's all
because it's so tight. Like it's so.
I did pencil it much tighter. That's actually a great example of one that I do sometimes, like because.
Dude, I love that piece, man.
And I wish I don't have it in front of me, but yeah.
I always go back to that and look at that one. It's just.
Thanks, dude.
Have you seen that, Mark? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I probably have seen it.
Oh my god, that thing's so fucking good.
He's this band of Praxic, it's like Death Grind from Portland. It's a fucking great album too, which is always nice when you do something for a band and you're like, damn, this album fucking rips, and I'm really stoked to have been part of it. But so look it up, please look up the album and listen to it. But it's a band called Apraxic, Apraxic. But I did kind of the it was a lot of architectural stuff, like so talking about working with a pen more. That was a piece where I definitely did more stuff with pen because it's like this kind of Blade Runner-y kind of architecture, but it's like Blade Runner kind of buildings in the background, but then the foreground is kind of like a kind of slum, like futuristic kind of
so good.
rundown, so that had like a lot more power lines and train lines and windows and things. Yeah, that's it. There you go.
Yeah.
Not really the same, but this is an amazing piece.
It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, dude. I appreciate that. I had fun, and that was one that took me definitely a little extra time because of all the minute detail, that kind of somewhere in time sort of detail I was trying to put in the background. But yeah, that was a little more pen, and like the figures probably were more brush. I'm trying to think because it was a little while ago. Certain aspects of it that were more brush, but a lot of it for sure was done more in pen, and that was one that those pencils were definitely tight. Those were tight pencils on that one.
It was blue line though. It was,
but
blue
yeah,
line?
I want to say that it was all blue. I do like from like once in a long while. Like I'll come in and do, because I really want to, maybe I worked over an area too much, or there's a face that the blue is just not giving me quite enough. Like where I'll come in with an H or 2H or something, and I'll pencil lightly in with regular graphite, but not too much. Yeah,
there was a time when there was a period where I was using blue line a lot, and what I would do is I'd get really gestural with it, and it'd be really messy and loose, and then I'd go back over with pencil and tighten it up, like I was actually drawing over my sketch, to where it was fun and everything, and it kind of helped my drawing, I think, but it kind of became counterproductive for me because I was like, I'll just skip the blue line part and just sketch lightly with pencil and then tighten it up. But that's just interesting that you can pull that off with blue line. Like that just blows my mind.
What you described with the blue line and then coming in with pencil, I actually use part of my sketch process a lot of the time when I'm working something out, because a lot of this stuff also I have pitched to clients. It's mostly all client work that we're looking at. So I've already, so there are definitely times where the blue line doesn't necessarily need to be that tight because I've already sketched it out and I already have a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like in my mind. And it's not the first pass that I'm doing, and I will I'll do the blue and then I'll pencil over the blue. And then I'll scan it. And a lot of times I will then take that and do a third pass. I'll take my iPad and do Procreate and do, a digital pencil over it. As a third pass for a sketch, and then sometimes I'll rough in some color or something like that. Like I've kind of found over time that because I like to sketch and I that initial, I cannot just look at I can't look at an iPad and just have a blank. All right, here's a blank screen, and start trying to go what is this even? What am I doing? I have to have it, physical. It has to be like a real pencil, But then when it when it comes to showing stuff for clients or having things be a little more editable and look a little more ready for stage, when I'm mocking stuff up, being able to come in with the Procreate and do a pass with that. It's not inked, and I strive to not make it look finished because it's not finished, but I feel like it makes an impact for a presentation. When it comes to showing my work for clients, just trying to in the minimum amount of spend the minimum amount of effort to get the idea across as adequately as it needs to be gotten across.
Right.
And go further. Yeah.
There's that hand.
Yeah, we got more stuff, more blue. Again, these were both, I think, entirely. These are pieces. The one on the left is a little snippet. I can't the record that it was done for hasn't come out yet, so you can't find the full thing out there. But it's for a guy I've been doing some work with for a while, and that was a really fun one because that was all organic texture and that's all brush, and it's kind of this, you can kind of tell it's a sort of monstrous kind of Leviathan, undersea Leviathan kind of creature, and that was just a whole bunch of very texture, kind of bubbly like flesh and chitin, like thorny kind of crab leg thing going on, and there's off screen there's teeth, and there's this kind of anglerfish sort of lures coming off of it, and like smoke and kind of smoking black vents coming off of it and stuff. So it's all these like this was a super fun one because it was just like, let's do a bunch of organic textures, a bunch of like slightly different, each a little more gooey than the last for lack of a, like in terms of the line quality, and like and I ended up doing, I think that was 100% in ink, and like that, or with a brush, excuse me, and the one on the right too, the hand, you could tell definitely was 100% with the brush too, which was for Creeperama piece, but just playing with lighting, doing that fun high contrast thing that is the fun thing about ink.
Oh yeah.
I like how you drew in like the form lines, like on that foreshortened kind of like crab looking arm that's coming out. Like that's just super helpful for like getting that 3-dimensional quality.
Yeah. And that's something I kind of do with, I think it's kind of unconscious. You could kind of see the contour. And then if you looked at the final ink, I definitely didn't ink it that way. It's just kind of their guidelines, so, I mean, talk about loose pencils. That one's about as loose as it gets, but those kind of guidelines help kind of think sculpturally about certain aspects of the subject, where especially when there's a kind of a foreshortened kind of aspect to it, like that one has. Like I feel like my pencils are less about making precise marks or like laying down a really precise guideline, and more about just exploring the contours, and then I kind of take them, because it's all about, you guys know it's all about like when you're trying to render light and shadow, it's all about following the contour of the object, and it's all about, finding the curve, finding the areas of light and shadow, and making your marks kind of go light to dark, thick to thin, based on the contour of the object. So it's like I'm always kind of trying to figure out where the light's coming from, or how the marks I'm going to make are going to interact with the light source, or how they're going to describe the light source.
Totally.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of refreshing to hear that, because even with hearing about your approach, because even with my own work, when I do my sketches, are usually kind of loose also, and there's something about taking that journey into the unknown and just trusting your gut, trusting that you're going to hit that pen the right way on the paper.
Yeah,
there's something about that excitement that is a bit of a lure when it comes to illustrating process that I kind of like. I guess,
and it keeps the energy level up, because sometimes things need to be tight, but overall, though, it's good to just take that instinct and just go for it, because it keeps the energy levels up. Because if the whole thing's too tight, it can get kind of robotic sometimes. It can be beautiful to look at, but I mean, overall, that energy level in the piece, I think it helps to have that approach overall, what you're talking about. I think that, just trusting your gut,
Yeah, it helps kind of build your own confidence in how you approach your work in a way. I think there's just something, it's like an adventure, it's like, I think with all of us, we don't really create a masterpiece. We just create multiple pieces, and it's all a journey to somewhere. We don't know where, but it's always a journey in each piece, even though you're kind of taking the things how to do, or you're taking all the things with you that you can depend on. There's got to be a little bit of sense of mystique and chance, I feel like.
Absolutely.
but in the sense of being an adventure, you know, you're trying kind of like Brad, you were talking about when you get in the zone. Sometimes it's just like you don't want to stop, but your body tells you you need to stop. But you want to finish that adventure, you know.
Yeah.
There's just something about having that loose sketch, not making it super tight, just enough open area for you to explore a little bit, you know, where you don't have to feel strapped down to a particular thing. Plus, I feel like if your sketch is too tight, then you're just redrawing it over again. I'm like, that's a pain in the ass and a waste of time.
Yeah.
For
And,
sure.
and there's certain techniques and certain things. I mean, like, if I were trying to draw, you know, like Tyler Pennington, you know, doing that Virgil Finlay kind of like really carefully crafted, or you know, Daniel, like you, for example, like someone who does really carefully tight, like gradients, like really nicely rendered, like fine detail, small lines, little lines, and like I would have to pencil more tight. You know, my pencils would need to be more tight because it would be hard to sustain like an even like gradient of light to dark over a larger area.
I think some of mine's a trick of the eye though, because when you look at my stuff up close, a lot of it's fairly loose.
Yeah.
When you zoom in on my stuff, it's definitely there's a rawness to it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm worried. Sorry, guys.
Is that the print or the original?
This is the print. Yeah. It's
Okay.
a print. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but you do such a good job of rendering those like consistent and even gradients over a large area, and that's something that I'm sure you've obviously been practicing for a really long time. But like my mark making, I like the like really thick to really thin kind of lines, and like one of the artists that I picked out that maybe we'll get a chance to talk about is somebody who I really like admire that ability to go from really thick to thin, and like so I kind of let the lines and let the ink, like the piece kind of lives in ink, and so to try and emulate that mark making in pencil wouldn't really work for a lot. You know, it's like you can't get the variety of line width with a pencil that you can with a brush. You know, getting that nice snap that like when you get that nice thick to thin, you pull those lines and they're you get just a nice, you know, you can't do that with pens or with you know, certainly not with pencils. So trying to emulate it, it's almost like it would be interpreting it.
I totally see what you're saying. Yeah,
you know, doing it in the wrong medium first, and then trying to interpret the wrong medium into the right medium. You know, and I like this stuff to live in ink. It lives in ink, and I like to give myself a chance to fuck up. I mean, it happens, but you know, sometimes you fuck up in interesting ways. Also, you know, is the other thing. Sometimes you do stuff that you don't intend to do, and you decide it looks better. Or you go like, dude, this should just all be black, and then that's the point where I'm like, glad I didn't, you know, spend an hour carefully rendering this like area that I then decided should just be, you know, blacked out anyway. So
Right.
keeps things interesting. That's for sure.
yeah, it does.
Well, it's cool, everybody. Let's do a wrap for this section. Once again, thank you for everybody on this. And let's take a 3-4 minute break, just water, bathroom stuff. We'll pick up the next piece. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds good.
All right, cool.